Langsung gue satu-satu apa-apa.
Ring Allah kaula nyuwun mugi njeng panutan Nabi Ya Muhammad Rasulillah Paduka paring pepeling panutan lawan pepadang mring sedaya wong sak bumi
mring Allah kaula nyuwun mugi njeng panutan Nabi Ya Muhammad Rasulillah Paduka paring pepeling panutan lawan pepadang mring sedaya wong sak bumi
Duh Gusti Pangeran kita mugi-mugi paduka paring pepadang eman menguja arjaning nafsu jroning urip ira elinga marang pepati kang ingkang padha asih tresna eman-eman yen ketekan pati durung sangu amal kang utama eman-eman
we will see this beautiful performance again during the break. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning all. Honorable Rector of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Professor Al-Makin, Director of School of Graduate Studies, Professor Abdul Mustaqim, the conveners, Professor Nurhaidi Hassan from UIN Sunan Kalijaga and International Islamic University of Indonesia, Professor Christian Lange from ENIS NISIS, Professor Pascal Buresi from MIDA, keynote speakers, Professor Martin van Brunsen, Professor Claudia Dirich, Professor Edith Frankie, Professor David Klaus, Professor Istiqomah, Professor Shafiq Hashim, Professor Shamsul Rijal, Professor Sunarjo, distinguished guests, panel speakers, and participants, welcome to Yogyakarta, the city of tolerance and tradition, and welcome to ENIS NISIS-MIDA Summer School 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, to commence the opening ceremony of this summer school, I kindly invite you to sing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya. Please rise for the national anthem. Please be seated. Thank you. Now I kindly invited Professor Abdul Mustaqim, the Director of School of Graduate Studies UIN Sunan Kalijaga, to give some words of introduction. Professor Abdul Mustaqim, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody. Excellency, the Rector of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, Professor Al-Makin, and his Vice Rector, Professor Sairon, Professor Abdul Razaki, Honorable, the Head of Academic Senate of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, Professor Siswanto Masruri, and all the deans of the faculties in UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, distinguished and special conveners of the International Summer School, Professor Christian Lange from NISIS, Professor Pascal Buresi from MIDA, and Professor Nurhaidi Hasan from Pascasarjana UIN Sunan Kalijaga. All speakers and participants of the summer school, including to all directors of graduate school from many state Islamic university in Indonesia. We cannot mention them one by one. Honorable Professor Amin Abdullah, Professor Mahasin, they are our lecturers, our promoter, and also Professor Mati and the others. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, my peace, mercy, and blessing of Allah be upon you all. Dear professor, speakers, researchers, and ladies and gentlemen, and all participants of the summer school, on behalf of Graduate School of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and welcome you to the International Summer School, hosted by Pascasarjana UIN Sunan Kalijaga in collaboration with MIDA and NISIS. The theme of this summer school is mobility and mobilization in Muslim society. Maybe we can translate its Arabic language, at-tanaqqul wa ta'bi'ah fil mujtama'at al-islamiyah. As you know all, in this year, the Graduate School of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta was appointed to host the summer school in collaboration with MIDA and NISIS. Yeah. The themes, mobility and mobilization in Muslim society. There will be discussions about mobility and mobilization in two interrelated dimensions in the structure of Muslim society that has been established and played an important role in shaping the religious, intellectual, and political developments of society during its centuries of history. Just to know that this is the first time of the summer school in Pascasarjana UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta. This is amazing event. So, I think Yogyakarta, not only the city of tolerance, not only the city of tradition, but also the city of summer school. Applause to UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta. Thank you. To be honest, I am so happy in this opportunity to be existent here. I honorably welcome to all our speakers and all the participants coming from various countries in the world. It is my hope that the summer school would be able to achieve its objective in providing an effective forum for academicians, researchers, and to advancing knowledge, research, and technology for humanity. Last but not least, my deepest gratitude goes to the Rector of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Professor Al-Makin, Professor Christian Lange from NISIS, Professor Pascal Burasi from MIDA, and Professor Nurhaidi Hasan from Pascasarjana UIN Sunan Kalijaga. The Advisory Board Organizing Committee, Professor Ahmad Mutakin, Professor Ahmad Rafiq. There are many names of Ahmad in Pascasarjana, yeah. And also Professor Munirul Ikhwan, and Bu Eti Rohayati, and the others institutions, companies, and volunteers who have directly and indirectly supported the success of this summer school. May God bless us all with good health to make this event a successful and enjoyable one. Hopefully everything is running well. Hopefully everything is running well. And I would like to close by pantun, ya. Burung irian, burung cendrawasih, cukup sekian dan terima kasih. Malam-malam tak sendirian karena ditemani kekasih. Cukup sekian dan terima kasih. Abdul Mustaqim, Director of Graduate School UIN Sunan Kalijaga. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
We do thank you, Professor Abdul Mustaqim. Now, let me invite Professor Nurhaidi Hasan, one of the conveners and Professor of Islamic Politics at School of Graduate Studies, UIN Sunan Kalijaga. Professor Nurhaidi Hassan, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everybody. The Honorable Rector of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, Vice Rectors, Head of the Academic Senate, Professors of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Director of the Graduate Schools of Yogyakarta, and also Directors of Graduate School of other state Islamic universities in Indonesia, distinguished speakers, esteemed professors, and all participants of NISIS-MIDA ENIS Summer School on Mobility and Mobilization in Muslim Societies 2022. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University of Yogyakarta. As one of the conveners, I am very glad that this event can finally be held after some delays because of COVID-19 pandemic. The discussion about this event actually started somewhere in 2020. My discussion with Christian and also with Pascal, with Albrecht and Maribel Ferro about the possibility to organize this event. First time in Asia, first time in, I mean, normally or usually this event was organized in European countries and only several times in Istanbul and then in Rabat, as I know, and also once in Tunis. This is the first time outside European countries and North Africa. Commencing today, over the next 5 days, we will see numerous enlightening keynote speech by distinguished speakers, inspiring presentations by students, researchers, and scholars from all over the world, and warm debates and also discussions on the topic under discussion. What makes us happier today is that our convention hall is full, occupied by the speakers, supervisors, and participants who travel long way from a dozen countries around the world, including the Netherlands, France, Belgium, Germany, Spain, Italy, UK, United States of America, Turkey, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Palestine, Iran, Pakistan, and of course Indonesia. No less important, our special guests from the network of Islamic universities, especially the graduate schools throughout Indonesia, who are also keen to come to Yogyakarta to attend this event. Allow me convey my greatest gratitude and appreciation to all of you who have made all valuable efforts to come to Yogyakarta and be present at this summer school or some virtually via Zoom. Yogyakarta, as Pak Director said, is known as a cultural center of Indonesia owing to its eclectic and tolerant characters. The Yogyakarta Sultanate stands firm in this province, echoing the smooth encounter between Islam, Japanese culture, and modernity. The unique cultural assimilation and acculturation promoted by the Sultanate have enlivened the spirit of pluralism and multiculturalism in this city. It is the city where Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University, the oldest Islamic university in Indonesia, which echoes religious diversity and mutual coexistence among different religious communities, is located. The summer school addressed one important topic that has of social, cultural, and political significance, the mobility and mobilization in Muslim societies. Many historians, anthropologists, and Islamic studies scholars have deployed the concept of mobility and mobilization to frame discussion on various topics such as production of knowledge, circulation of Muslim texts, trading the diasporas, and interaction between members of different religious traditions. Considerable attention has been given to the ways in which mode of knowledge production has changed with the introduction of new media, paper, printing, and how it has adapted to the internet era, and how its increased facility of movement affected the mobility of texts and ideas across borders. Discussion of Muslim mobility must also acknowledge the continuing resonance of specific trajectories of movement to and within the Arabian Peninsula, signified by prophetic precedents, Hijrah and Hajj. Some other scholars have used the concepts more as adjectival signifier for what viewed as positive aspects of Muslim histories, often intending this as a potential corrective to contemporary crises afflicting our societies as a result of growing religious intolerance and conservatism. In this, the two concepts are interconnected with the term cosmopolitanism, which implies diversity, openness, inclusivity, tolerance, pluralism, and progressiveness. Mobility and mobilization are in fact two central concepts behind the discussion about cosmopolitanism, which stands as an antithesis against narrow minds, exclusivity, intolerance, radicalism, and others. Finally, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the organizing committee, my colleagues from the School of Graduate Studies of Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, led by Director Abdul Mustaqim and Vice Director Ahmad Muttaqin. Special thanks go to Secretary of the Committee, Munir Ikhwan, who has been involved in preparing this event from the very beginning. And also members of the committee, Ahmad Rafiq, Nina Mariani Nur, Najib Kailani, Muhammad Yunus, Ita Rudiah, Abdul Mufid, Nosu Bisnaini, Suhadi, Amanah Nuris, Ahmad Fauzi, and the other lecturers, as well as the professors from graduate school, Professor Amin Abdullah and Professor Mahasin. Head of the administrative staff, I prefer to label him as the commander of this event, Eti Rohaiti and her entire crew. I would like also to thank my colleagues and friends from Indonesian International Islamic University, Yanwar, Pribadi, Samsul Rijal, Syafiq Hasim, Farid Saino, Ilyas Marwal, Wirawa Anuraga, Haulanur, Jason Zainal Muttaqin Fahrian, Muammar Kadafi, who was in charge with the visa things and the immigrations, very difficult indeed, and all the entire crew of the Faculty of Islamic Studies of the university. Last but not least, I would like to thank NISIS-MIDA and ENIS, Christian Lange, Pascal, Albrecht, Maribel Pero, and all the professors from the institutions for the trust granted to us as your partner in organizing the summer school. I also like to thank both Rector of Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, and Rector of Indonesia International Islamic University for their support for this program. It is the collaboration that involved NISIS, MIDA, ENIS, Sunan Kalijaga, and IIIU that makes this wonderful academic event possible. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Nurhaidi Hassan. Now I'm inviting Professor Christian Lange, Director of NISIS, the Netherlands Inter-University for Islamic Studies, to come on stage and give the speech. Professor Lange, time is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Esteemed colleagues, dear friends, dear members of the audience, dear participants in the conference on mobility and mobilization in Muslim societies. I want to begin by thanking the previous speakers, Professor Abdul Mustaqim and Professor Nohadi Hassan, for their kind words of introduction. Please allow me to tell you just a couple of things about NISIS, the Dutch-Flemish Graduate School of Islamic Studies, so that you know who you are dealing with for the next couple of days. One half of our delegation from Europe is connected in one way or another to NISIS. NISIS is currently located in Utrecht, which is the city where I live and work, but it is really a collaboration of many different universities in the Netherlands and Belgium, 9 Dutch universities, the 2 universities of Amsterdam, Leiden University, Rotterdam, Utrecht, Groningen, Maastricht, and Tilburg, and Nijmegen, and also 1 Flemish university, the University of Leuven. And our goal and task at NISIS is to organize events to support and train the new generation of scholars in Islamic and Middle East studies. So a couple of times per year we organize study days, conferences, like the one here. We do like to collaborate very much with international partners. So we have a good network of connections with other European partners, among which ENIS and the MIDA network, and I think Professor Boresi will tell you a little bit about MIDA, a little bit more about MIDA in just a second. But we also seek to establish connections with institutions and universities outside of Europe, and it gives me great pleasure that today we can be here at the University of Sunan Kalijaga in Yogyakarta. And I'm very grateful to all the people involved in helping us to organize this event, also at the International Islamic University at Depok in Jakarta. I was reading a little bit about Sunan Kalijaga yesterday, and it struck me how nicely his life and career connects with the theme of our conference, namely mobility and mobilization. You know, Kalijaga lived in a time of intense mobility, I would say, not only because around 1500, the time when he lived, Vasco da Gama had discovered the sea route around the Horn of Africa, connecting the western fringes of Eurasia with India and the east, but also because there was intense mobility across the Indian Ocean, connecting Indonesia with India, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, Egypt, and beyond. I don't know to what extent Kalijaga himself was really very mobile. Professor Martin van Bruinessen mentioned this morning to me that he was from Java, so maybe, I don't know if you ever left Java, maybe we should think of his friend and another one of the 9 Muslim saints of Java, Fatahillah, in terms of mobility, because there's the story that I read about that his father was a Sharif, a Hashemite nobleman from Egypt, and his mother an Indonesian princess. So maybe he symbolizes the element of mobility very nicely, whereas Kalijaga maybe can tell us something about the idea of mobilization, because from what I understand, he was very successful in combining the universal message of Islam with local customs and ideas and beliefs, and thereby vitalizing and mobilizing Muslims in Indonesia and beyond. So again, I'm very happy that we're here. I want to thank also a number of people, if you will allow me, starting with the members of the organizing committee, and I will also mention here that Pascal Boresi was on the organizing committee, but also Professor Albrecht Fürst from Marburg University, also Professor Maribel Fierro, who is sitting to my left, from Spain, who is an eminent historian of Al-Andalus. Then I wrote the names down also because there are so many Ahmads. It was already mentioned this morning. Also the people who put the program of this conference together. These were junior researchers affiliated with Mina, Rukaya, Zainab, and Munir. Thank you very much for the wonderful job you've done. I think we are really going to experience a very rich and fruitful conference. I also want to highlight the names of Audrey Debarque, Julia Galluccio, and Sarah Müller, who have been pulling strings behind the scenes in France and the Netherlands. And then, of course, I want to thank the professors of Sunan Kalijaga University, Professor Nur Heidi Hassan, who has been in close touch with us for almost 2 years now, Professor Abdel Mustaqim, who has very kindly welcomed here, and also, of course, Rector Professor Al-Makin. Munir Ikhwan, who has been very kind and helpful in helping us to organize things here locally. And I also want to shine a light on Muammar Gaddafi, who has been going the proverbial extra miles these last couple of days to help us. Thank you very much, Muammar. I also want to thank the keynote speakers in advance, Professors Shafiq Hashim, David Kloos, Sunarjo, Claudia Derricks, Rijal Shamsul, Edith Franke, and Martin van Brunessen, and Istiqoma Nurhan for diligently preparing their talks. And I want to thank all the speakers for sharing their research with us. So we are really greatly looking forward to your contributions. Before I hand over to the next speaker, let me make just one practical announcement. On Wednesday, we will be given the opportunity to visit sites around Yogyakarta. We are very much looking forward to it. Those in the NISIS, or those participants in the conference who want to join us, please get in touch with Sarah Müller, and maybe also Munir. The two are organizing this excursion. I will point out Sarah Müller to you. She's sitting there filming me as I speak to you in a green shirt. So do get in touch with her or with Munir. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to many conversations with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lange. Now I'm inviting Professor Pascal Buresi, Scientific Coordinator of MIDA, Mediating Islam in the Digital Age. Professor Buresi, time is yours.
Okay. Before giving the thanks to all those who deserve it so much, I would like to present a little some of the acronyms that we have. We are specialists of acronyms. So I will try to explain who we are, where we come from, and why we are now in Sunan Kalijaga University in Yogyakarta. Now, who are we? Not personally or individually, but institutionally. We will learn to know during this week who we are individually, but institutionally. So once upon a time, there was a Dutch institution. Christian Lang presented it, NISIS, the Netherlands Inter-University School for Islamic Studies. That's an acronym. And there is a twin institution in France, which is ISM, l'Institut d'études de l'Islam et des sociétés du monde musulman, which is organized differently, but it's the same. They began in 2010 to, they decided in 2010 to share their experience and to organize together a spring school, a yearly spring school. And since 2010, well, these two institutions have organized spring schools. When I was elected or nominated, I don't know, head of the French institution, ISM, I proposed to enlarge a little the partnership and to integrate new institutions. So Marburg University joined us, then the CSIC, the Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas, the National Spanish Research Center for scientific research, and then Sesamo Italia. So we had many organizations coming up and sharing with us this experience and this organization of yearly spring schools. Well, you know that to make research, well, we had many institutions, and when we were organizing things, we had all these acronyms, all these names. It was half a page. So we decided after a week of brainstorming to create a new acronym, and that's how ENIS was born. ENIS, it's the European Network for Islamic Studies. Normally, if we put ENIS, we don't have to put any other of the acronyms, but well, we have habits and we want to put them. So, well, there is ENIS and there are many others. But to organize things, we need money. And to organize these spring schools that were very useful for the professors and for the PhD students, we needed money, and so we decided to think about one topic that seemed to us very accurate in the period, and we began to work and we decided to answer a call for application from the European Union in the frame of a process that is called ITN, Innovative Training Network. Well, that's MIDA, Mediating Islam in the Digital Age. We thought that asking the question how the technological innovations are modifying or have modified in the past the beliefs, the practices in the Muslim societies, and how it has modified the relation between the Muslim people and their own past, and the way we are working and on and studying the Muslim societies. Against the odds, we won this project. So the question of money was not anymore a question, and we could go beyond our usual horizons that were the Mediterranean. As it has been said, well, spring schools were organized in Rabat, Istanbul, Tunis, Madrid, Rabat, Tunis, Istanbul, Granada. Well, so we were limited by the Mediterranean. It was not a limitation, and it was very good, but we wanted to go much far away where the action is. And where is the action? In the southeast and in the greatest Muslim country in the world. If working on Islam, we are not going to Indonesia. Where to go? So that's why we wanted to collaborate with our Indonesian colleagues. Well, this was the plan, and I'm very happy that it went on. But COVID crisis passed through us, and so it was not so easy to organize. The spring school is no more a spring school. It's a summer school. It has been cancelled twice, postponed, and we have other events that have been cancelled many times. Maybe you don't know, but 4 of our keynote speakers have cancelled somehow their participation. They won't be physically present with us. They will be present online. That's the new world in which we are living, and I think that there is a new degree of uncertainty that we will have to live with. But well, against the odds, we are here thanks to all the help we received from our Indonesian colleagues and institutions. And Christian has mentioned Nuraidi, Hassan, Al-Makin, and Abdul Mustaqim. Munir, Ikhwan helped us a lot to organize it. And without them, we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much. Last but not least, I'm twice happy. I'm happy because we made it, and the week that is in front of us will be very rich. I don't doubt it. But I'm happy also because I think that it is a unique chance, and that in the future we won't be able to organize such event again. So I think we are living a unique moment with such travels, because because of the uncertainty, and also because the environmental demands are growing increasingly strong, and they are totally justified. How many tons of carbon have we freed in the atmosphere to be all together here? So I think that well, it's a one shot, and it makes its price. So I'm twice happy. So before going back home and let the sadness invade our souls for the things that we will have lost, I think that we have to enjoy and to celebrate and to this time, and to thank you very, very much for your warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Buresi. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to invite the Rector of UIN Sunan Kalijaga, Professor Al-Makin, to give the opening speech and to officially open the summer school. Professor Al-Makin, the floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Guten Morgen. Buongiorno. Peace be upon you. Welcome to Yogyakarta. Herzlich willkommen. Welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan bihudurikum. Bienvenue. Bienvenuti, bienvenidos, sugeng rawuh, selamat datang. What a very wonderful day. We are very honored, and it is our pleasure. I would like to express so many gratitudes to all of you. I promise I will not repeat names already mentioned by previous speaker. Please forgive me. It is our honor to mention a very important name, of course, Professor Pascal Buresi from CNRS, Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, and also MIDA, Meditating Islam in the Digital Age. Thank you for very lovely introduction, Professor Buresi. Maribel Fierro from Spanish National Research Council, Albrecht Fuchs from Zentrum für Nähe und Mittelostudien, Philipp University of Marburg. I believe last night we have a chat. Thank you, very lovely chat. Dankeschön. Immer wonderful. Welcome, Yogyakarta. And Professor Nur Haidi Hasan from State Islamic University and International University of Indonesia. My old friend, my close friend. We leave a coach table and kitchen utensil together in Berlin, Pak Syafiq Hasim. Thank you, Pak Syafiq Hasim. Welcome to Yogyakarta. As usual, you visited us many times. To local committee, whose name already mentioned earlier, thank you very much. Director of a postgraduate program, head of PhD program, and the secretary, head of master program and the secretary, and head of the bureau. Please allow me to introduce my team here. From my right side, from your left side, Professor Siswanto Masruri, he's the head of the Senate. Please raise. Thank you, Professor Siswanto Masruri, and of course, Pak Martin van Broenissen, old friend of Sunan Kalijaga. Welcome back, Pak Martin. He told me last night this is his first time to visit Indonesia during the pandemic. And of course, our mentor, our teacher, Professor Amin Abdullah. Please raise yourself, Prof. Amin Abdullah. Thank you very much. And congratulations for your new appointment as a steering committee or advisory board of Pancasila Ideology of Indonesia in Jakarta. Congratulations. Vice Rector 3, Dr. Abdul Rozaki, and also his new appointment as the head of Indonesian Muslim community groups. And Professor Makhasin, please raise Professor Makhasin. Thank you very much. And also head of Indonesian Ulama Council of Yogyakarta. And we have Pak Director, and we have the Dean of Faculty of Usuluddin, Ibu Dr. Inaya Rahmania. Please raise Ibu Dr. Inaya. Thank you very much. And the Dean of the Faculty of Education, Ibu Marni. Thank you very much. And the head of the administration, Pak Syakur. Please raise yourself, Pak Syakur. Thank you very much. So, summer school, I heard from Pak Munir Ikhwan, invite 60 speakers, 60 presenters from 16 countries. Indonesia, US, Dutch, Belgium, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Turkey, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Aljazair. Welcome all to Yogyakarta. Ahlan wa sahlan bihudurikum. If I were allowed, I would like to sit here one by one and listening to your insight of your recent development in your research. Unfortunately, I have other duties. Please allow me to leave after that. But of course, Sunan Kalijaga is very proud, and the theme of mobility during this current globalized world is indeed very timely and very important. Sunan Kalijaga is ready to collaborate with you and ready to welcome your spread of knowledge, your generosity, your kindness to speak in this very important forum for us. And we are all interested in listening to your research. Last night we have chat together with few of you, and indeed I'm very fascinated of your research themes. And of course, you are not always serious during this meeting. You should not always sit down here listening or conversing about your research. You also need a break. So please visit our important site, historical site like Borobudur Temple if you have time, Prambanan Temple if you have time. That is 7th century building. I think is as important as other building, other shrines, other temple, other vihara, pura in other terms. Of course, this collaboration invites another opportunity of friendship and strengthen our brotherhood. This is a good opportunity. We wish at least to know each other and then to talk to each other during conference and outside the conference. Please allow ourselves to talk, to know better, and then make a plan if necessary, and then have a schedule to visit each other. Of course, last night I have a conversation with Professor Lange. Thank you very much for your time. And I browsed quickly about your works about hell and paradise. It's very important themes. The location of hell, the location of paradise, according to Muslim worldview. It is indeed very important, particularly if we talk about that in Indonesia. Many preachers in Indonesia talk a lot about hell and paradise, promise and threat. And I wish you enjoy and have a lot of fun. Viel Spaß. Ciao, adios, bis bald. Auf Wiedersehen. See you soon. Thank you for the friendship. Thank you for this opportunity. We wish to strengthen our brotherhood, to our collaboration. Thanks to local committee. Thanks to international committee. Please do not hesitate to come again to Jogja to have another wonderful seminar. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, for those who are Muslim, please recite Basmalah to open this conference officially. For those who believe in other faiths, please recite as you wish, as you feel comfortable. For those who do not believe at all, just wish good luck. Let's pray together. Let's recite together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
We do thank you, Professor Al-Makin. Ladies and gentlemen, before we close the ceremony, I kindly invite you to sing the hymn of UIN Sunan Kalijaga. Please rise for the hymn. Please be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end, I inform you that we will have a 15-minute break after this, but before, we will enjoy again the beautiful performance from our student. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kalima Sada.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are going to listen to the first keynote speech delivered by Dr. Shafiq Hashim. Dr. Shafiq Hashim is also known as a scholars of Islamic Studies, a lecturer at the Faculty of Islamic Studies, Indonesian International Islamic University of Jakarta. Normally he is called Kiai Shafiq, but he belongs to the category of unique ulama, unique alim, because he has long hair and, kind of nyentrik in Bahasa Indonesia. Indeed, he grew up from the pesantren tradition, Islamic boarding school tradition, coming from Pati, Ojupara in Central Java, and after studying in pesantren, he moved to Jakarta to study at Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University, the Faculty of Usuluddin, right? Yes. And then from his student time, actually, he was already active in publishing his idea in national newspapers, mostly on gender issues, Islam and genders. And that is why I already know him, like in 1990, the end of 1990s, through his works on Islamic feminism, yes. And then, after finishing his study in Jakarta, he went to Leiden to study Master of Art at Leiden University. And then back to Indonesia to do some community services and also community development and advocacy in Jakarta especially. And then he went to Europe. Now he went to Berlin, yes, to study at Freie University in Berlin to take his PhD there. He has a lot of publications, very active in writing kind of short article, commentaries, published by Fulcrum, yeah, because he is also somehow affiliated to ISIS, Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore. And also he will have a publication by Brill, yes. His dissertation is now going to be published by Brill very soon. Congratulations, Pak Shafiq. Yes, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Shafiq Hashim to deliver his speech. Please, time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Nur Haidi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good mornings, honorable participants, Professor Amin Abdullah, Pak Martin, Pak Pascal, and others. This is a good opportunity for me, and I think quoted speech by Pascal and Christian Lange, this is the real mobility of you all from Europe and Mediterranean countries to Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, and welcome to all of you. When I got invitation from Pak Nur Haidi Hasan, I directly accepted because this invitation is not only honor for me, but it brings me a memory back to 2012 or 2013, if I'm not mistaken, when I got funding from NISIS to present my PhD proposal in Istanbul, Turkey, and now I'm joining all of you in the NISIS activity. For this occasion, I would like to talk on mobility and mobilization, Islamic scholarship, ulama, ummah, and contentious politics. And yesterday night, I already met Pak Martin van Brunissen, and he will raise very harsh question for me, very hard, no, thank you. Actually, he asked me a little bit to talk about my experience during the mobilization era. I call it 2016, 2012. I will mention later on. So there is big event in Jakarta, Islamist mobilization, the largest Islamist mobilization in Indonesia, and this is part of my presentation today. But let me to a little bit say about my plan and argumentation to talk about mobility and mobilization. In this regard, I would like three issues to see or to operationalize the concept of mobility and mobilization. The first issue is about Islamic scholarship or Islamic intellectualism in Indonesia, and then second is about ummah ulama relation, and the last one is about the contentious politics. In the first issue, I would like to connect the concept of mobility alone with the production of Islamic scholarship or Islamic knowledge or intellectualism in Indonesia, as mentioned by Pak Nur Hadi Hasan. I argue that the mobility of seeking Islamic sciences to Middle East, to Mecca and Medina, or to other countries in the current situation or in the classical or in the previous era of Indonesia really contribute for the formulation of Islamic scholarship. Without mobility, I think we Indonesian Islam will not have well-established construct of Islamic scholarship. The second issue is how ulama and ummah build relationship in Indonesia. I would like also to see how the definition of ulama is various, different from one to another group of the Muslim community in Indonesia. I argue that the capacity of mobilizing ummah or the Muslim community is used to qualify someone to become ulama or not. And it refers to the Islamist mobilization in 2016 and 2017. And also a little bit talk about ulama-ummah relationship, yeah, to evaluate the effectiveness of the mobility for seeking knowledge and its connection with the prevalence of digital era. Yeah, in our traditional Islamic sense, mobility is important part of seeking knowledge, talabul ilmin, yeah. And Al-Ghazali stated that if we want to learn, the best place is in the city environment, for instance. And with regard to this issue, I'm arguing that the digital era that makes self-learning processes such through the media social platform, through YouTube, and then Facebook's, Instagram's, Google, is no longer, or to be questioned as no longer relevant for the context of mobility. And the third issue is how to use the concept of mobility and mobilization to look at contentious politics in the last decade. I argue here that such type of mobility, knowledge and Islamic science, as the product of mobility, not all kind of mobility, can be used to consolidate the mobilization. I will explain later on. Then let me to elaborate the first issue or the first perspective on the relationship or connectivity between mobility and the establishment of Islamic scholarship or Islamic intellectualism in Indonesia. I can say here that the production of Islamic learning and scholarship in Indonesia cannot be separated from the activity of the mobility. And in the history of Indonesia, the activity of Islamic mobility in general can be categorized into three directions. The first direction is mobility from abroad, the external to the archipelago of Indonesia, and from the the second direction is the mobility from Indonesia, the internal to abroad. Yeah? And the third one is, I can call the national intra-mobility, mobility within the context of Indonesia itself, especially after the well-establishment of Islamic scholarship or Islamic knowledge in Indonesia. People are moving from one pesantren to another pesantren in East Java to Central Java, and then from Central Java to West Java, from different island, Kalimantan, Sumatra, go to East Java to study on Islam, especially the traditional and classical Islamic Islamic science. And you know that the first mobility which is indicated by the coming of Islam to Indonesia, brought by the disseminators of Islam, I think Sunan Kalijaga, that Christian Lang already mentioned, is part of these people, but actually he is not part of the first generation of Islamic disseminators in this context of Indonesia, and until now we are still debating about when it come to Indonesia firstly, and who come to Indonesia, either directly from Saudi Arabia, from Arab, or from Persia, from India, and etc. And this is kind of still debated issue, and even some people already said it is already finished. But if you see the production of book of history in Indonesia in the current situation, at least in the last 15 years, there is also some kind of movement to write a book that indicate that actually Islam come to Indonesia at the first Hijri or 7th century. This is rather ideological, and it is to counter the general perspective and opinion of Western historians that say that Islam come to Indonesia and at the 12th, at the 13th century. But it is still live, debated among the academicians. And people like Sunan Kalijaga and other Sunan sign, we call it Sunan. We have 9 prominent Sunan Kalijaga, even it is only popular among Javanese people. People live in Sumatra maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago didn't recognize the rule of Sunan Kalijaga. Even for the Salafi group, they didn't recognize the contribution of this Sunan, the rule of the Sunan to mobilize or to bring Islam to different place of Indonesia. And I would like to say to you that actually, as I mentioned before, that when Islam came to Indonesia either at the 7th century or 12th or 13th century, the direction is coming from outside, from the external, and then the mobility from the islands, the Nusantara, we call it archipelago of Indonesia, Nusantara, go or went abroad around 15th century. Some historians state that even before colonial transportation for Hajj was provided, actually the people, some students from Indonesia already travel, move from Java to Jeddah to Hijaz and live there. But in the era of colonizations, yeah, and provided transportation was already good by the colonial government, and in 1860, the first batch of people who are went to Mecca to do pilgrims, and part of them, they prefer to stay there to study and pursue Islamic science, and part of them went back to Nusantara, to Indonesia. But then, because they already know Mecca and Medina, and I think they already know that the best place to study Islam and etc., better to go to that place, and then they went against to that place. This is what Sunarjo illustrate about Syekh Nawawi Al-Bantani, actually. So Syekh Nawawi Al-Bantani is very important figure in this in Nusantara. He came from a place called Banten, and Banten, I think, very well known in the context of colonialization of Dutch government to Indonesia, because this place, the farmer rebellion happened at the time, and Nawawi Al-Bantani come to Mecca first, and then doing Hajj there, and then come back to Indonesia, and then back again to Mecca for a long time, and then he stayed there, and he wrote a lot of Islamic book in Arabic. Even Sunarjo described his personality in the Mecca in the 19th century as person who actually very fluent in writing, but not very fluent in Arabic speaking. But honestly, to say that he had voluminous book on Islam, ranging from the topic of fiqh and the topic of tafsir and various topic of Islam, and his book, yeah, become the reference of building and formulating one of Islamic scholarship in Indonesia, especially among the traditionalist Muslim group. This is the example of the third mobility, yeah, from Indonesia, from the archipelago to Mecca, and to Nawawi Al-Bantani, many people from Indonesia studied Islam in Mecca and Medina. And actually, the two directions are still happening until now. Still, Islamic missionary from Middle East coming to Indonesia. Let's say Salafism and Wahhabism. They have intense mobility, if I can quote Christian Lange word. So they have some kind of intense mobility. They have programs. They have systematic movement, not only visiting this place, bringing the knowledge, but also building the place, building the building. I mean, sponsoring the establishment of the pesantrens, mosques, Islamic center, and etc. And the development is quite quite promising, meaning that quite growing. Maybe some people say that the funding from the from Middle East, especially Saudi Arabia, are already declining. Maybe this is the official funding, but the private fundings coming from rich people in Saudi to establish some kind of Islamic institution here are still going on. And also, of course, the mobility of terrorism, of Islamic radicalism, yeah, which is indicated by the presence of Middle East terrorist network like IS, Islamic State, Jamaah Islamiyah, and other things. And the third direction of intra-mobility within the context of Indonesia, as I mentioned before, that we have more than 25,000 pesantren around Indonesia. This is very huge Islamic institution. If I can explain to you, pesantren is traditional Islamic boarding school. In the beginning, the pesantren didn't use the state curriculum. They are independently operating, self-financing, and they organize their own self. And the number is quite big. We call it this pesantren is traditionalist pesantren. And among these pesantren, there is some kind of network mobility. Yeah. For instance, if I study something in Sarang, and then Sarang is the biggest pesantren in Central Java. Maybe the student is more than 15,000 living in the area, and very well known and knowledgeable to study about Islamic fiqh and also ilmu alat, we call it grammar, Arabic grammar, and etc. If you finish there, you should go where? And meaning that among the pesantren, this kind of network of mobility, which is based on the expertise of resource person and expertise of such pesantren. This pesantren is specialist on some kind of Islamic knowledge, fiqh or tafsir, and etc. This pesantren is specialist in the Arabic grammar, and this pesantren is specialist in difference. And that become people move from one pesantren to another pesantren to pursue and to complete their Islamic knowledge. And you know that within the pesantren is also connected with kind of some kind the genealogical brotherhood. This pesantren belong to this family, and this family have sons and get married with the daughter of another pesantren, and then establish pesantren, new pesantren, and etc. Yeah, this is what I mentioned about how mobility have influence and contribution to establish Islamic scholarship even from the, let's say, the old period of Indonesia, pre-colonial era, and in the era of colonialism, and until post-colonial era right now. And then the second issue that I would like to highlight is about ulama and ummah relations. The ulama and ummah are two influential and important elements of Indonesian society, which are each other connected by religion, by Islam. In the perspective of traditional Islam, both ulama and ummah, or the Muslim community, are placed in the patron-client's model of relationship. The ulama, because of their knowledge capacity and also the wisdom, are patron for the Muslim community in both religious and non-religious issues. The ulama guide the Muslim community on how to perform and practice life in compliance with the norm and value of Islam. And the ummah themselves, in fact, not only follow the guidance of their ulama in Islamic issue, such following fatwa and tawsiyah, Islamic recommendation, introduced by them, but their guidance in non-religious issues. So traditional Muslim community also ask to the ulama about what they face in the daily life, when they can have party for wedding of their son or daughter. They go to to consult the ulama to some extent. Traditionally speaking, in the context of Indonesian tradition, ulama do not talk or guide their ummah on political preference. It is kind of taboo for them, ulama, meaning to interfere their community in political issue. There are some reason why they cannot interfere about the political issue. The first is politics are intriguing issue. In some pesantren, their ulama make a serious distance to political practices, meaning, and also the state, because they do not want to get polluted by the politics. Most traditionalist ulama of Indonesia also look at the politics as part of as siyasat. Yeah. In Indonesian language, siyasat have bad connotative meaning. Siyasat some kind is to manipulate other people, yeah, to manipulate other people. But in Arabic, siyasa is politic, but in bahasa Indonesia, in Indonesian language, it is translated as siyasat, and it had not quite good meaning for the common people of Indonesia, because it has connotation to manipulate the others. Playing politics means to manipulate our friends. The second reason, politics can polarize the unity of ummah. This stand has been long taken by Indonesian traditional ulama based on their experience in seeing how different political affiliation can divide and break human brotherhood. Based on this, ulama and ummah connection cannot be built on the basis of political interest. In the modernist tradition of Indonesia, the era of emerging identity politics, however, relationship between ulama and ummah is not only shaped by scientific interest, but also social and political interest. It can happen because the concept of ulama-ness, especially in the current situation, is not only based on the scientific category, but also on institutional and identity politic category. Identity politic category. And as I mentioned before, I taught you 2016 and 2017, there is the emergence of Islamic mobilization, the largest Islamic mobilization in Indonesia. It is a series of movement, series of mobilization, not only one time, but for several times. Yeah, and you know, the participants of this movement have their own definition. Yeah, so the movement, we call it 212 movement, because it happened at 21 February or 2 December. The largest event was attended, according to their claims, million people, but according to the Google map, prediction, it was attended around 5,000 until 700,000, 500,000 until 700,000 people in Jakarta, in the central Jakarta. So this movement create new category of defining ulama. Yeah? They define such person or figures as their ulama when they are supporters of their movement and opposant to the ruling regime. It is very interesting also that the role of ummah in defining someone to be categorized as ulama in this regard also changing. And also the word viral viral in social media and etc. is one of the strategy of ummah to define someone is ulama or not. Yeah? All these categories can be applied, for instance, to such person. His name is Suki Nurharjo. Suki Nurharjo is a person was born in in East Java, and he is not categorized as ulama, even he didn't have any mobility experience for seeking knowledge either in the context of Indonesia or abroad. But then he produced YouTube, produced broadcasting in the social media about a very sensitive issue, and his main production is to fight against everything related to the official government or related to the current president of Indonesia, Joko Widodo. Yeah? He had he produced had video and broadcasting, and also he targeted to the largest Muslim organization, Nahdlatul Ulama. It's very strategic. One, to suit Joko Widodo, and the second is to suit the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia, to destabilize this Joko Widodo and also this largest Muslim organization, and got viral. Yeah. And he, one of the inspirator or one of the supporter of the 22 movement. 22 movement, and among the participant of the movement, he is categorized as ulama because of his broadcasting, his production, and also his controversy. Yeah, his controversy. This is one thing that defining ulama is not only based on the scientific category, but also on the viral, or I don't know to say, I don't have term to name this kind of issue. And actually, one thing that I would like to say, and I already mentioned slightly to Pak Martin, that the Islamist group of Indonesia, based on this kind of development, they use capability of mobilizing movement as the category to define someone ulama or not. If he is able to consolidate the ummah to Islamist contention, yeah, and then the title is given to them. Even the title is only in the social media actually, but you know, it is very important because you know the users of the internet, Indonesian users to the internet is very high. I think right now is more than 160 millions people using gadget, and because of that, mobilizing through digital platform is very important. I myself use also the digital platform to campaigns, but something that I believe that this must be campaigns for the issue of religious tolerance and pluralism. The last thing that I would like to say to you is about the contentious politics, the movement 212 movement. We call it, other name is Action to Defend Islam, Angkatan Bela Islam. That I already mentioned, happening between 2016 until 2017. The main trigger is actually political issue about the leadership of Jakarta. Jokowi became president in 2014, and he must be replaced by his vice governor. His vice governor, his name is Ahok, Chinese name, but actually the original name is Cahayapurnama, Basuki Cahayapurnama. He is Chinese, double minority. He is Chinese and also Christian, Protestant, a little bit strict Protestant follower. And one time he visited one island in the north of Jakarta, small island, and he met with the sailors community. And because at the time facing and approaching the gubernatorial election, and the campaign, informal campaign was already at the beginning. And in this meeting, Ahok stated something which is very controversial, according to many people. And he said at the time that related to Al-Ma'idah 57 ya? Hah? 51, Al-Ma'idah Quranic verse 51 is arguing that Muslim people cannot be led by non-Muslim people. And this issue was manipulated to the original word given by Ahok in the social media, and it triggers the movement, the series of the movement. And I think this is the, if we compare to Tahrir movement, I'm not sure about the number, but this is very big and very serious, continuous for 2 years. And you know that one thing that I should describe here is that the figures or the main actor, mastermind behind the movement are mostly people who have some kind of mobility experience in seeking Islamic knowledge, especially from Middle East, from Mecca and from Medina, and they use their knowledge to mobilize people to go that we, Jakarta people, should have Muslim governor. And this case actually become a legal case. Yeah, Ahok was brought into the court. Ahok was accused as doing blasphemy. And one of my personal experience, actually, I was one of the expert witness for defending Ahok position, because at the time I just finished my PhD, and my thesis is about Majelis Ulama Indonesia, about fatwa. And this movement is based on fatwa introduced by the Council of Indonesian Ulama. So I was interrogated by the police about 9 hours in the National Police office in Jakarta. They were asking me whether what Ahok said is wrong according to the regulation of making fatwa in the Council of Indonesia or not. Yeah, and the process gone, but at the end, this movement won because they are successful to bring Ahok into the jail for 2 years, and also they won because Ahok was not elected as the governor of Jakarta. And from this kind of illustration, I would like to say that beside mastermind of the movement who have mobility background, studying Islamic science in the Middle East, there is also an illustration of the ulama who also travel to Mecca to study on Islam. These people I should mention here: Said Agil Siraj, the former General Chairman of Nahdlatul Ulama, the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia. He did master degree in Mecca, MA in PhD in Mecca. Rizik Sihab did degree in Mecca. Bahtiar Nasir, the actor of the 21, also did a degree in Medina. But then what made the difference is both the intra or national experience of mobility of seeking knowledge. Both are differentiated because the leader of Nahdlatul Ulama got traditional Islamic sciences in the pesantren. It's kind of local products of Islam in here. They know about the tradition and etc. And the mastermind of 212 21-2 movement didn't have some kind of traditional background of seeking knowledge in this, mostly in this country. What I want to say is that local education, local production of knowledge of Islam in Indonesia could influence this kind of spirit of using Islam as tool of mobility and not. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shafiq Hasim, for your enlightening presentation and talk about mobility and mobilization, the relationship between ulama and ummah, covering the theme, very broad one, from the coming of Islam to the archipelago, and then the dynamic of pesantren, relationship between one pesantren to another, that inform mobility and mobilization as well. And then he also talked about continuous politics related to 212 Islam defense action that was very popular, that succeeded in toppling Ahok as the governor of Jakarta. This is quite political. So with this, I think we have some ideas or some questions to raise to Dr. Shafiq Hasim. I would like to give you the opportunity to raise the questions. Please raise your hands if you have the questions. We still have like 15 minutes, yes, to go. Yes, Maribel, and then Yeah, you can start.
Thank you very much. I'm completely ignorant of most of the things that you talked about, but I learned a lot from it. And there is a specific issue that you raised that I'm very interested in the issue of whether Muslims can be ruled by non-Muslims.
Microphone. Maybe you should switch on.
Thank you very much for your very illuminating talk. I'm talking from ignorance because I'm not a specialist on the topic, but I'm very interested in an issue that you raised, which is the issue of whether Muslims can be ruled by non-Muslims. And you mentioned that there was debate about someone who was not Muslim of religion, whether he could be, if I understood well, governor of a certain region. So my question is, these were objections raised from a religious point of view, because constitutionally, what is the law of the country? That's what I was interested in asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribeth. The law of the country actually allow every human being in Indonesia to become the leader. There is not some kind of restriction based on religious identity, yeah. But even we have some kind of this law, but the community, they have their own understanding on law, which is inspired by Islamic law. I mean the how to say, the regressive understanding of Islamic law. And we are still have many people are struggling and defending the Islamic law must be applied in the real life of political issue, social issue, and etc. And I think until now, the issue of leadership are still competed by them. And the example is the Jakarta gubernatorial election in 2017. In which one of the candidate was Christian and Chinese, and because most of the Jakarta people are Muslim, 100% Muslim, so they don't want to be led by non-Muslim leaders. Yeah, it also applies to another issue like interfaith marriage, Muslim people getting married with non-Muslim, Muslim men get married with non-Muslim women, still also debating in this country. But definitely the law is neutral. The law doesn't have any restriction, but the law of the community themselves or itself, that some can become the inspiration to how to say, to oppress the governments. The government must be in their side to implement Islamic norm.
Okay. Next question, probably. Yeah, Munirul Ikhwan.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Munir from UN Sunan Kalijaga. Thank you for your very interesting talk. I'm just wondering that you mentioned, you highlight two concepts, mobility and mobilization, with particular emphasis that mobility is more focuses on the idea of talabul ilm, while mobilization focuses more on political activism, if I understand correctly. But this one thing. The second is about the the idea that from your presentation, I understand that mobility is more, nuanced in pre-modern period, while mobilization is more nuanced in modern period. Is this true, or because of the scarcity of data to know more about mobilization in pre-modern period? Thank you.
Actually, when I got the invitation and I look at the topic, I'm struggling to construct some kind of, let's say, preliminary theoretical constructs about mobility and mobilization, and then I try to connect with the cases that I experience and have data about that kind of on issue, and I arrive at some kind of preliminary conclusion. What have you mentioned in the question to me? So I understand that my understand may be wrong, theoretically speaking, but I understand that yes, mobility that I would like to emphasize here is to relate and to connect with the mobility of the people, especially the Muslim people, to seek Islamic knowledge. And then mobilization is action, how to use the result of mobility, the product of mobility to mobilize people. Because of that, I mentioned that mobility mobilize mobilizations. Mobility consolidate can be used to consolidate mobilization. For the case of Jakarta, 212 movement actually, besides politically driven, that kind of movement, but without the product of knowledge, yeah, and this product of knowledge which is used by the mastermind, the main actor of 212 is kind of product of type mobility of seeking knowledge. As I mentioned before, the type of mobility of seeking knowledge that differentiate them from other Muslim figures that didn't use mobility to mobilize, like the General Chairman of Nahdlatul Ulama, Syed Agil Sirot, is about the experience mobility of getting knowledge. One is much more getting knowledge from the tradition of modernist Islamic tradition, getting to study in Saudi Arabia, in Middle East, and one is even he is getting Islamic knowledge in Mecca and Medina, but then he has some kind of bekal itu apa ya? Yeah, sensitivity of locality, sensitivity of locality, meaning that traditionalist ulama study a lot, learn Islam in the pesantren after getting strong foundation of Islam in Indonesia, and then they go to Middle East to study further. And this foundation is very important. And this foundation influence what I call these people do not use the product of mobility to mobilize or to consolidate mobilization.
Okay, very good. We still have like 5 minutes, 6 minutes. If there are still 2 questions, yes, 2 people. Pak Martin, one, and then in the back, yes, you. Silakan Pak Martin.
Thank you. If by mobilization we mean bringing people out into the street, certainly the demonstrations against the mayor of Jakarta that you mentioned in 2016 were the largest recent instance of mass mobilization under the banner of Islam. There were earlier events, of course. The revolution against the Dutch was also a mass mobilization. There were fatwas on jihad that served to mobilize. But let's stay with the case that you just mentioned, because I think it's a very important case to understand. I still do not understand it. There's many aspects that I'd like to question. But I remember a conversation we had at the time, and I was asking you about one of the leaders, Bakhtiar Nasir, who was a preacher who had studied in Medina and who leads a network of graduates from Medina. And I was asking you, isn't it through this network of people who have studied in Medina that he is able to coordinate all his fellow alumni of Medina who have their own constituencies throughout Indonesia to mobilize people from every town and village to come to Jakarta for the demonstration against the authority of the established organizations. For Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, by far the largest organizations, very well established, their leadership made clear that they did not want their members to take part in the name of the organization. As individuals, okay, we will not forbid you, but you cannot carry the identity. Well, it seemed that the opinion of the official or the large organizations did not really count, and it was a different type of religious authorities that were able to mobilize masses to come to Jakarta from all over Java and perhaps even from outside Java. At the time I asked you, is it this network of alumni from Medina that has been the most effective element in mobilization? At that time you didn't agree with me. So I was a bit surprised that you've pointed to these people's former mobility as one of the factors in the mobilization. I remember the answer you gave. I mean, Bakhtiar Nasir, dia main di tempat lain. He has other places where he has influence, other networks, not based on study in Medina, but based on study in Java, in Gontor. So my question is, have you revised your interpretation, or should we perhaps relativize the influence of Medina in this instance of mass mobilization in Indonesia?
Yeah, hold on. We collect the last questions by the lady over there to all together. Please, a short question.
Yeah, sorry, I have two questions. My name is Sarah Mohida.
Sarah, yeah. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, I don't think you can see. Hi again, Partner Heidi. So I have two questions. It's a little bit related to these mass mobilizations. This question actually about the NU Muhammadiyah role. So because of the 212 movement and other hardening of Islam in Indonesia, there are like people who questions, are they weakening influence of NU Muhammadiyah in the mobilizations of Muslim society in Indonesia? That, one. And the second is, I would like to know your opinion about the recent consolidations for internationalizations of Muhammadiyah and NU. As we know that they kind of, even in their Muktamar now, internalizations of Muhammadiyah and NU is one of their main goal. And what do you think gonna happen, and how it gonna influence the internal and international mobilizations of Indonesians Muslim? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Martin, for the question. I remember about that conversation. After the conversation, actually I got some kind of new information. So in this movement, there is small group. If I'm not mistaken, nine group which consists 9 people. Most of them are alumni of Middle East, especially Medina, walking around Jakarta. But then for the national-wide of networking, I think Bakhtiar Nasir was influenced by his network, yeah, with Pak Amin Abdullah, mohon maaf ya, with Pesantren Gontor, yeah, with Pesantren Gontor. Pesantren Gontor is one of the oldest and largest pesantren. It's very unique pesantren because the pesantren produce people like Professor Amin Abdullah, very progressive, open-minded, and etc. But also produce people like Abu Bakar Basir, and also Bahtiar Nasir. But they have very good network, and we call as modernist Kholafi pesantren, Kholafi pesantren. And I think Pak Bahtiar Nasir did network through this kind of pesantren Gontor network, because people who are coming from Jakarta, who are coming from to Jakarta to get participation, to take part in the mobilisation 212 from Medan, from Surabaya, and etc. I have data that most of them are organized by Gontor alumni. Not 100%, but the contribution of Gontor alumni to mobilize people from the region was very strong at the time. And then to Sarah Wahida, at the time I thought that NU was finished because of this movement. Yeah, because people come to Jakarta, million people, NU and Muhammadiyah were finished because of this movement. Weakened at the time, these two organizations, these two largest Muslim organizations, were weakened at the time, but I'm not sure how to describe, but until now actually 212 movement are already declining. They have alumni, but the alumni are in conflicts, yeah, and they are no longer having ability to consolidate the mobilization as big as 212 mobilization. Now NU and Muhammadiyah are on fire, especially Nahdlatul Ulama, because very close to Joko Widodo, got everything from the government, but Muhammadiyah also still very strong. And about the internationalization strategy, I think we can talk later on with private conversation, because I think it's not really, yeah, meaning that they now formulated a strategy to internationalize their organization, where the NU and Muhammadiyah are very big. NU itself, 90 million members predicted. Yeah, 90 million members predicted, even bigger than Germany, I think. Now, their influence in abroad are very small. I think most of you, if you are not specialized in the study of it, you do not know about the Nahdlatul Ulama, unless Pak Martin know about this issue. And now this organization want to socialize as international organization. Thank you.
Yes, we can establish chairs of Indonesian Islam in Edinburgh, for instance, or in other universities, or in Utrecht University, yes. It would be nice. Yes, before we close the session, there is one short question from participant in the Zoom. Yes, that is, the question is like this. I would like to know if there is any connection or relationship between the various types of religious authorities you mentioned, namely traditional authorities, mainly institutionally organized, and those that emerge mainly online. What kind of relationship, if it exists? How is each type of these authorities contested? You can answer. I don't know, this is from Zoom, yeah, because there are also significant numbers of participants following our discussion via Zoom.
Should I answer?
Yes, yes, so short answer as well, I guess. Competition between the different authorities.
Yeah, of course, connection, connectivity, and extra there. Even, let's say, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah are very two largest Muslim organizations, and the relationship is like Tommy and Jerry. Sometimes love, sometimes hate each other, but still communication is there. Even with the Salafi organization, or even with the Wahhabi, the conversation and the connection is still built. Even we are, or they are, have different understanding on on Islam. Private matter become incentive to have communication among each other, actually. Even as political leader or as the leader of Muslim organization, they have tension each other. But for the private issue, they can communicate each other. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Pak Shafiq. Give applause to him. Yes. This is the end of the first session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Thank you, Prof. Nurhaidi. And we have 15-minute breaks. There are some refreshments outside outside of this room. So please, everybody, help yourself. Yeah, we have 15 minutes, and please, we invite Kalimasodo to fill in our break times. Please, and enjoy it. Okay. Or you can stay here, but someone will serve you. Monggo silakan, ada break di ruangan ini. Kita break 15 menit, lalu sambil if you want to enjoy Kalimasodo performance, okay, sorry. You can stay here and people will serve you for the break. Yes, you can you can take into this room. Kalimasodo performance, please. Yeah, have the break and have the refreshment and take it here. Yeah, problem.
ngilmu iku kalakone kanthi laku lekase lawan kas tegese kas nyondosani setya budya pangekese dur
Okay, we're about to start in a couple of minutes for the keynote speech, the second keynote speech with Professor David Close, who already with us through via Zoom. And let me invite Professor Mercedes Volait to lead the program as the chairs of the keynote speech. Time's yours, please. Yes, you can go there and you can sit over, stay over there.
Sabah al khair lekulukum. I'm really happy to be here. It's delightful. And it's not only the first time we convene out of the Mediterranean region, but I think it's also the first time that we get such warm welcome from the institution that is hosting us. So thank you very much for this. It has been wonderful since this morning. Our speakers now is he's a senior researcher and portfolio manager at the Royal Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asia and Caribbean Studies in Leiden. He's an historian and an anthropologist of Southeast Asia, and his interests include religion, violence, colonialism, gender, knowledge formation, and the social and political aspects of climate change adaptation. He's the author of Becoming Better Muslims, Religious Authority and Ethical Improvement in Aceh, Indonesia, which was published in 2018. And he will be speaking about moving around, moving up, mobility as a driver of women's Islamic authority. So, floor is yours.
So much. Can I just check whether you hear me well?
Please
Is
go
the
on.
sound okay? Thank
Perfect.
you. Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Many thanks to the conveners of the conference for inviting me. It's a great honor, and of course to the Sunan Kalijaga, Pak Heidi and all your colleagues, thanks so much. I'm so sorry I cannot be with you in person. Thanks also to Audrey de Barg for organizing, and I look forward to having this exchange with you. I'm going to share my screen. So let's hope that all goes well. So another test whether you can see this. Can you see my slides? I'm just assuming that everyone can see my slides.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Recent decades have seen a conspicuous rise of women Islamic authorities across the globe. And my aim today is to discuss this trend with you by looking at it through the lens of the conference, the theme of the conference, mobilities, from the vantage point of Southeast Asia, particularly Indonesia and Malaysia. I will start from the following basic premise. Although women, including Muslim women, have never been stationary, it is probably fair to say that globalization, cheaper transport, and cultural changes related to education and emancipation have made women in relation to men more mobile, thereby altering gender relations in all kinds of contexts, including religious contexts. And the question at hand is how this ongoing shift has reconfigured modes of authority in Islam. My argument today comes in two parts. The first part is relatively straightforward. During the past 100 years, Muslim women have steadily gained access to the institutions of religious knowledge as students, as scholars, as pilgrims. This has for quite obvious reasons, strengthened their claim to religious authority. Mobility has much to do with this trend, for access depends not only on male leaders and other gatekeepers opening the doors of these institutions, it also depends on the ability of women to arrive at these sites in the first place. The second part of my argument is somewhat less straightforward, or at least less clearly articulated in the literature on the subject. If we want to gain a good understanding of the ability of some women to claim authority, their newly acquired access to formal institutions of religious learning, such as mosques and schools and universities, is not sufficient. We must study in a more general sense where increased mobility has taken women beyond the domain of religion proper in supposed secular spaces as students, as workers, as professionals, and so on, and how this has impacted their claims to public authority also in the religious field. Connecting both these angles is my suggestion that mobility in a geographic or spatial sense is often, perhaps always, intimately connected to that other kind of mobility, namely social mobility, and that this observation is of crucial importance if we want to understand the factors, political, economic, cultural, and so forth, that either enable or constrain women to exercise religious authority and on this basis to influence public debates and gender norms in Islam. My intention is to present a quite broad view of the theme, historically and ethnographically, and to make this concrete through specific examples from my own research and from the literature. As for my own work, I should mention some of the people I've collaborated with over the years. They include Nur Isma, who is present in the audience, affiliated also with the university, Mahani Musa from the University of Science Malaysia in Penang, and Tika Ramadini and Corina van Belen, who carried out research internships focused on some of the cases that I will discuss. And now I'm supposed to be able to, we do it like this. For some reason, I cannot go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. Thought I was doing this well with a thing in my hand that I can switch slides, but I have to do it in a different way. Doesn't matter. This is Khairunisa binti Muhammad Ali, portrayed presumably in the late 1940s or early 1950s in her job as a religious teacher or ustaza in front of a class of women students at Madrasa Al-Mashur in Georgetown, Penang. Al-Mashur at the time was one of the most prestigious Islamic modernist schools in the archipelago. In 1953, Khairunisa became the first woman in the history of that institution to be appointed headmaster or Guru Besar of the girls section. Ustaza Khairunisa's story does not fit very well at first sight in a conference on Muslim mobilities. She was born on the island of Penang. She stayed there her whole life, and she died there too, not too long ago, in 2017, at the venerable age of 84. It is, however, very much a story of social mobility, of the interconnection between women's religious formation and leadership, and entry of Muslim women into a newly emerging class of urban professionals. Penang in the first decades of British colonial rule was a place of great movement, a globalized cosmopolitan city. Like other port cities such as Bangkok or Rangoon, it stood at the forefront of social and political change. Its population was highly literate. There was a thriving printing press. It was, in the words of the great historian of the Straits Settlement, C.M. Turnbull, a, quote, magnet for Chinese and Malay reformers and radicals, end of quote. The immediate context is the relative importance of Penang as a place in the Islamic reformist movement of the early 20th century and the push within that movement for women's education. Before the 20th century, Islamic schooling in Southeast Asia was mostly a prerogative of men. Boys and girls were taught by village imams or learned elders, but these lessons were limited to basic knowledge and requirements of Islamic orthopraxy. Boys, by contrast, were permitted to pursue the path of more advanced religious education by entering a pondok or pesantren, a step described by Jim Siegel for the case of Aceh, Indonesia, as a highly masculine affair. A rite of passage in which a man transitioned temporarily, but sometimes for several years on end, from the world of the village to the more secluded world of religious learning. It was part and parcel of merantau, the practice of leaving one's home region for work, study, or an experience in the hope of returning one day a successful person. In the late 19th and early 20th century, colonial domination prompted Muslim leaders and intellectuals to call for the reform of Islamic practices and institutions, including the admission of women to religious schools. It is not clear how many of these reformed madrasas admitted women in the pre-war period, but some certainly did. In Java, the women's section of the Islamic Modernist Association Muhammadiyah established schools for girls and courses aimed to train women preachers. In Padang Panjang, West Sumatra, Rahma el-Yunusiyah, born into a family of religious scholars, founded an Islamic girls' school, Dinia Putri, in 1923. Rahma began by teaching basic religious knowledge to married women. In 1928, the school taught more than 300 boarding students. In British Malaya, meanwhile, possibly the first and certainly the most well-known Islamic school, or one of the most well-known Islamic schools to admit girls, was Madrasa al-Mashur. Established in 1914 by leaders of the local Arab community, it attracted students from all over Southeast Asia and even from India. In 1919, under the leadership of the progressive writer, publisher and intellectual Syed Sheikh Ahmad al-Hadi, al-Mashur opened its doors for women. One of them was Khairunisa. Khairunisa was born in 1933 of Jawi Peranakan, in her case mixed Malay, South Asian and Achenese descent. She enrolled at Al-Mashur in 1946 as part of the school's first post-war cohort. Having received religious instruction as a child, she was placed in one of the more advanced groups. At the age of 16, she became a teacher at the school, while at the same time continuing her own studies. In 1953, at the age of 20, she became the first woman in the history of the school to be appointed headmaster, Guru Besar of the girls section. And we see her here walking on the right side of the picture, besides the head of the school, the director of the school. She was also a political activist, a nationalist, and a writer. She was active in the Singapore-based literary society Angkatan Sastrawan 50, or Generation of the Writers of the 1950s. Asas 50 was part of a broader left-leaning movement aimed at modernizing Malay literature and society. Together with her future husband, whom she met within this network, Khairunisa wrote a short book titled Cahaya Pendidikan, or The Light of Education, a reformist and nationalist guide for educating youth capable to, quote, fight together with men in all fields in order to raise the nation's standard of living and to defend our rights, end of quote. The book emphasized the equal rights of girls to receive schooling from a young age. She also published stories, poetry, and concise theological treatments, for instance, in the Asas 50 associated magazine Hiburan. I worked a little bit on her writings with Nur Isma, and we were struck, among other things, by an interpretation of a Quranic verse on male leadership titled Leadership of Those Who Are Weak, which according to Khairunisa should be read not as a statement of men's rights to claim power over women, but rather of their responsibility to take care of women's safety, well-being, and happiness. As a teacher and a headmaster, Khairunisa encouraged her students to be vocal. She introduced public speaking classes, which she taught herself. She taught debating skills, which was in line with her own activities as a political activist in the nationalist party UMNO. And her story points to an intriguing, I think largely unintended outcome of Islamic reformism in this period. One of the main reasons why many male reformists supported women's Islamic education was the idea that colonialism placed a great burden on families and households, and thereby on women, to preserve Islamic norms. But in my view, the most significant impact on women's Islamic education lay not so much in the domestic sphere, as the reformists anticipated it. It lay in the public sphere, aiding women like Khairunisa to actively claim a voice. In Indonesia, in similar vein, Aisha schools trained women as mothers and educators of their children, but also, importantly, as propagators of their faith, as activists, and as public speakers. In this context of increasing access to schooling and an expanding public sphere, the title of Ustaza, a woman religious teacher, came to carry considerable social status. In Khairunisa's own words, becoming an Ustaza was a big deal then. Jadi Ustaza besarlah pada masa itu. This is intriguing in the light of stereotypes that persist until today of the Ustaza as a village or neighborhood teacher who counsels local women on private and personal matters, but not much else. Khairunisa's life offers a much richer picture of an expanding public role, revealing a history of women's Islamic professionalization across social and institutional contexts. I have spoken about the Islamic modernist movement and what it afforded women in and beyond Islamic institutions. The focus on women also comes with a clear invitation to revisit the distinction often made, especially in the Indonesian context, between modernism and traditionalism. Bitter contests were fought out between both groups, especially in the first half of the 20th century, which may distract from the fact that if there was one issue on which they tended to agree, it was the permissibility and indeed the need to open up Islamic educational institutions for women. In Java, Eka Sri Mulyani and Nelly van Doornharde have shown women came to play a more central role as leaders within traditional Islamic boarding schools, particularly the girls' sections. Indonesia's main Islamic traditionalist association, Nahdlatul Ulama, meanwhile established a women's branch, Muslimat NU, or Women of NU, in 1946. And we see here a picture of one of its local branches. This is Umi Rahimun. I met her first in 2009 when I was carrying out research for my PhD in Aceh, Indonesia. She is portrayed together with her staff in front of a traditional Islamic boarding school called Daya in Aceh, which she founded in 2001 and continues to lead today. In this school, she conveys basic religious skills and knowledge to children of primary school age, and in the evenings she teaches more advanced religious subjects to older students. Rahimun was born in 1968 in a relatively prosperous family, which suddenly fell into poverty when she was 6 years old. There was no money to enroll her into a teacher training college, which is what she had always wanted. And like many other poor students, the only option was to continue her study in a traditional Islamic school. But Rahimun was ambitious. She wanted to become a teacher and she wanted to become someone who mattered. She spent 8 years in two of the most prestigious centers of traditionalist Islam in the province, Putri Muslimat Masjid Raya in North Aceh and Daya Darussalam in South Aceh. At 27, she continued her studies at the State Islamic Institute, currently the State Islamic University, Aranyeri in Banda Aceh. By now, she was able to support herself as a private religious teacher. In 2001, at the age of 33, she founded her own religious school in a village in Aceh Besar, not far from the provincial capital of Banda Aceh. Together with her husband, a fellow student at the university, she developed this school into the successful institution it is today. Rahimun is in many ways a conservative scholar. She endorses restrictive norms with regard to sexuality, public morality, and the need to uphold Sharia law. But she's also quite critical about the ways in which these norms are typically applied, targeting women rather than men and the poor rather than the rich. Like Khairunisa, she maintained that women should not only seek knowledge, but also become public figures, who actively resist patriarchal norms in society. What gives her the authority to do this, of course, is her knowledge, but also, I would argue, the way in which she obtained this knowledge. As a young and independent traveler and seeker in and beyond Aceh. As a student at Labuan Haji, she joined educational tours, one of which led her through Java and Sumatra as a member of the Indonesia-wide Organization of Islamic Students, Himpunan Mahasiswa Islam. As part of this trip, she visited the Dinia Putri School in Padang Panjang, and it made a huge impression on her. Many years later, she named her school Daya Ar-Rahman after its founder, Rahma El-Yunusiyah. You can see it here on the sign. Let me briefly return to the notion of perantauan, the custom of traveling away from home to achieve knowledge, experience, and success. One of the many major social changes that have transformed modern Indonesia is that this practice is no longer limited to men, but rather has become the norm for men and women alike. Young Indonesian women whose families can afford it move away from their villages to study in Jakarta and Makassar in Europe, in the United States, Australia, the Middle East. Women from lower classes travel in much greater numbers to Jakarta's satellite cities, Bandung, or places like Batam, Island Riau, where since the 1980s, textile, electronic, and other manufacturing industries have attracted great numbers of workers. Or they travel to Hong Kong, Taipei, Dubai, where they work as domestic servants or maids. In Malaysia, similarly, rapidly industrializing states like Selangor and Penang have since the 1980s attracted a huge, relatively amorphous class of domestic migrants. This change has very little to do with religion per se, and all the more with ideals related to national development, education, economic opportunity, or the lack of it, in short, social mobility. However, the fact that perantauan is no longer a male category, or an exclusively male category, does have an impact on religious domains. It has allowed women like Rahimun to base their authority on their experience as autonomous travelers and seekers, besides their religious knowledge as such. This cultural turn towards women's mobility coincided with another turn, the Islamic turn, or the Islamic revival, as it is more commonly termed. Johan Lindqvist has shown how among female workers in Batam, the Islamic headscarf, or jilbab, quote, offers an identity that protects against the dangers of social interactions in the context of migration, end of quote. It is one of several techniques to manage and navigate the emotion of shame or embarrassment, kemaluan in Indonesia, is his argument. The view of the cultivation of certain Islamic practices, in this case modest dress, as a response to migration with all its senses of alienation, uncertainty, and indeed shame, is a common trope in the literature on the Islamic revival. This includes the idea that the headscarf allows young Muslim women in Indonesia, Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan to navigate fast-growing cities. The Islamic student movement of the 1970s and 80s that triggered the Islamic revival in Malaysia and Indonesia has also been understood partly in these terms. Take, for instance, Zaina Anwar's Islamic revivalism in Malaysia, one of the very few ethnographic reports of the student movements in the 1980s that focused on women. Zaina conducted her fieldwork on the campus of the University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur. Women in the Islamic student movement, well-educated, upwardly mobile, and motivated individuals, she calls them, were particularly visible on campus due to their dress and donning of a small headscarf, a garment known as a mini telukum. They came to be known as the Dakwah girls. The Islamic student movement, or Tarbiyah movement, was inspired by transnational Islamic organizations and globally resonating political events such as the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It was rather sectarian in nature and regarded by a large part of the Muslim majority as a threat. The Malaysian government actively suppressed the Islamist opposition, on occasion violently, and the student groups were forced to keep a low profile, organizing themselves through cell-like structures based on small Islamic study groups called usra. According to Zaina, these study groups exerted strong attraction on the young Malay rural urban migrants who felt ill-prepared to compete with the better educated urban non-Malay students on the campus. She writes, still citing Zaina Anwar, "For many of the Malay students from rural villages or small towns, the destabilizing effects of their sudden move to an urban polyglot led them to fall easily into a social spiritual niche that provides them with a sense of security and belonging." End of quote. And we may be critical of this analysis, which doesn't do much justice to the pious pursuits of these students, the religiosities of these students. Here, however, I would like to draw attention to another one of Zaina's observations, bearing on a feature of the Islamic student movement that is less commented on generally in the literature. I'm gesturing here to the opportunity that this cell-like structure, which was largely gender segregated, allowed young Muslim women to develop leadership skills in a decidedly religious context. One of the women said to Zaina, quote, "When I meet the first-year students, if they want to get closer to Islam, I'll guide them." End of quote. The Dawah groups on campus put considerable effort in professionalizing their trade. They developed leadership courses, including courses specifically geared toward women. These courses aim to cultivate moral exemplars able to instill in their juniors a particular feminine comportment in line with revivalist norms, but also, as such, women Islamic authorities. As another woman told Zaina, quote, "I feel I have changed. I have confidence to be an imam or a leader, to be an example to the juniors," end of quote. These opportunities were further reinforced because of the hierarchy among these groups. Students who reached a certain level of understanding moved up, becoming students in more advanced study groups and teachers to their younger peers. One of the women students who embraced the Dawah movement in the 1980s was Harlina Siraj, a student of medicine at the National University of Malaysia. She joined an usra of the so-called Islamic Republic Council, a group founded by graduates from the United Kingdom. The IRC was seen as a radical organization and operated largely underground. It emerged as a more public organization under the name of Jemaah Islam Malaysia, or JIM, in 1990. A women's wing, Wanita JIM, was founded in 1993. Harlina made a career as a gynecologist and obstetrician at the medical faculty of the UKM. Parallel to her professional career, she moved through the ranks of JIM, a period in which she progressively challenged what she regarded as the subordination of women within that organization. In 1999, she became the head of Wanita JIM. In the meantime, she embarked on what might be seen as a third career as a media personality, a television expert sought after by media producers because of her ability to combine religious and medical expertise in public discussions about contentious topics such as women's sexuality, reproductive health, sex education, and abortion. Such performances illustrate what I've termed in one of my articles the mutuality of religious authority and professional expertise, and the advantages it gives to women by expanding religious debates beyond religious institutions, mosques, madrasas, tariqas, that were essentially designed to keep them out. The Islamic study group is no longer a sign of sectarianism or radicalism. It has become a very common feature of mainstream religious practice. A common feature also of a Muslim public sphere that has rapidly feminized. For today, generally, the members of these groups and the audiences of Islamic-themed events and gatherings are often in majority women. Across Southeast Asia, these audiences demand women authorities, able to discuss everyday religious issues from the perspective of women's experiences. The logic of the market and commercialized, mass-mediated expressions of Islam contributes to bringing supply and demand closer together. Enter on the scene, and this has been going on for some time now, a growing number of Malaysian and Indonesian women celebrity preachers. Take, for instance, Dr. Salida Sohaila, who is trained in both secular and Islamic law at the International Islamic University Malaysia and Kiel University in the United Kingdom, and who combines an academic career with regular performances on television. This is her in a popular program, Al Maroya, on TV Al Hijrah. And do note the slogan, Dari Wanita Untuk Wanita, by women for women. Mobility is a factor in the emergence of these preachers, many of whom have degrees from Al-Azhar or other prestigious centers of Islamic learning in the Middle East and elsewhere. Mobility is also a topic performed or addressed by these same preachers. Take, for example, the first real woman celebrity preacher in Malaysia, Mashita Ibrahim. One of the reasons why she became very popular as a radio and television preacher in the 1990s was the fact that she combined her religious messages with the conundrums of fast urban living. In her radio show, Morning Motivation, she explicitly addressed listeners caught in traffic jams to advise them on questions like how to perform one's morning prayer while driving. Today, the eye doctor, preacher, and motivational speaker, Prof. Muhaya, routinely vlogs from her car on the way to work. She does give, as such, she gives tangible expression not only to urban mobility as a common feature of everyday life, but also of related professional values, such as efficiency and multitasking and savviness in relation to new technologies and online culture. Such performances are not without tensions. I'm sharing an Instagram post by the Malaysian writer, influencer, and television preacher Ustazah Fatimah Sharha. A seemingly random picture of the passenger seat of her car as she is off to yet another event. We see some food and water on the go, and what seems to be an academic text, something from a syllabus. The post comes with a short poem, #MyPhD-Journey. Quote, driving in the morning from Gombak to Bangi, leaving my baby with her father while I seek for knowledge. Just sat down, already missed my family. Behind every woman PhD, a great husband shows his service. Mother will never forget about our main project, #mega project is in the home. End of quote. Although such posts reflect reality in the sense that Fatimah Sharha as a media personality is frequently on the way, and that at the same time she was working on her PhD at the time, they are also obviously carefully crafted and produced, as the nicely crafted poem also shows. The combination of professional and public appearances and motherly duties are very much part of Fatimah Sharha's brand as a celebrity preacher. Her children are often portrayed accompanying her to events. That her husband often joins to look after them is part of the message, which is progressive to the extent of communicating shared duties within the household. At the same time, it is clear that male preachers, even those known for portraying themselves like ideal husbands and family men, do not emphasize the responsibility and burden of parenthood in quite the same way. That burden remains to lie with women much more than it does with men. A brief conclusion. The Prophet Muhammad was reported to have told his followers to seek knowledge even until China. This is what his followers did, to such an extent that travel, in the words of Sam Gallen, became, quote, a normative feature of medieval Muslim education, end of quote. This travel was never entirely limited to men. Akram Nadwi, who has sought to excavate women scholars from Islamic history, finds great travelers too. In the 19th century, Indonesian women traveled to Mecca, becoming, as Tika Ramadini has shown, teachers upon their return. Such travels are much more common today, as we can see from the role of women institutions as well as their place in the public Islamic preaching scene. At the same time, it's important to look beyond scholarly networks to gauge how mobility drives religious change. The work of Atiya Ahmad and Miriam Luking, both of whom have studied Asian labor migration and women's Islamic practice and experience in a single analytical framework, is critically important, as is the work done on women and pilgrimage. These works do not deal very explicitly with the question of women's Islamic authority. They do strengthen my argument for taking a broad view, linking authority to changing religious norms and interpretations, but also to everyday mobilities. Women going to the other side of town for a weekly usra, the daily commute for study and work, an emerging Muslim public sphere of which women are very much part, today's real and false dreams of social mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kloos, for this very informative and stimulating talk. So now I think we have 20 minutes for discussion. So, yeah, please raise your hand or raise your question. And I have one. Okay.
I have quite two. Thank you very much, David Kloos, for your very interesting lecture. I have two very stupid questions. First of all, I saw in your slides, and maybe I saw it wrong, that Zaina Anwar didn't wear a headscarf. Is there a reason for that? And the other one, in 2 times in your lecture, I saw you mentioning cooperation between Malaysia and Indonesia. What is that a normal case? Is there a lot of collaboration between those two countries, or was this a special occasion?
I've never asked Zaina about her personal choices in that matter. Zaina is a very well-known Islamic feminist, the head of the Islamic, or a founder, co-founder and long-time director of the Islamic feminist organization Sisters in Islam, a globally renowned organization. But I've never discussed his personal choice with her. As for, sorry, I hear myself resonating. I'm not really sure what collaboration, specific collaboration, or at what level you mean between Indonesia and Malaysia. Of course, there's continuous travel to stay within the theme between Malaysia and Indonesia, and continuous cultural context as well, including in the religious field. I think many of the people that I've mentioned have also been, Malaysian women have been to Indonesia, Indonesian women have been to Malaysia. Look at those celebrity preachers, for instance, they also travel back and forth and feature in Indonesian preachers feature in television programs in Indonesia. So there's definitely a lot of cultural contact, which makes a lot of sense, of course, given the language, which is very similar. I'm not sure whether that answers the question.
It does. Other questions? Yeah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, David. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay. Great to see you in this summer school. Yeah, I enjoy listening to your presentation on the, let's say, celebrity preachers from the professional women. I'm wondering who are the audience? Yeah, who are the audience of the professional preachers? Do they come from middle class? And also, how do the preachers maintain the preacher-audience relationship? Because as Martin Slama has written, there is a shifting of this kind of relationship due to social media and so on. How do this development impacts or shapes the relations between the preachers and audience? Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful question, and very important, of course, to understand these performances and the messages of these preachers. So I think when it comes to these popular preachers, mass media, celebrity preacher, I know much more about Malaysia. So I hope you don't mind if I answer based on that knowledge. The audience is trans class. Definitely not just urban middle classes. I think that's one of the interesting aspects, that these preachers, they cater to different social classes, to villages as well as urban populations, to lower classes to whom they speak really as experts and authorities, and to middle classes or upper middle classes perhaps more like peers, especially when it comes to that aspect of professional authority, which strengthens their religious authority. So I think remarkably mixed. It is also more mixed in terms of gender than one would think. Most audiences are majority women. But there are some preachers out there who have had, when I met them and went with them on the road, had surprisingly many male followers as well, radio shows and the television shows, or on social media, which is quite interesting. The relationship, I mean, there's one of the reasons why we see many more women authorities is of course that there are these women audiences who demand a different kind of relationship, much more based on an idea of sisterhood, of being able to discuss with each other all kinds of issues and contentious issues and dilemmas on the basis of women's experiences. And you see that online as well, actually, in their online communications. Although there's always that tension where, but that goes for online communications in general, I think, or celebrities in general, it kind of appears to be this very close relationship, which in practice is, of course, impossible to maintain when authority or when these communications have a very broad reach.
Another question?
Thank you very much. I'm Francesca Rosati from Leiden University, working on Muslim women's religious education in China. Professor Klaus, thank you very much for your insightful presentation and for your writings. Also, they're very inspiring for me. I found so many similarities between your research and mine in terms of how women women engaged in religion reproduce certain discourses to promote Islamic education. And here comes my question. I briefly did fieldwork in Malaysia among Chinese Muslim women who moved to China to Malaysia, from China to Malaysia to seek to further their studies. And as far as I could observe, they are not among the audience of these women celebrities that you introduced in your presentation. And the main reason is because they are not proficient in the Malay language, in the case of Malaysia. So I was wondering if I'm not mistaken, the women you presented, they speak in their native languages, either in Indonesia or Malaysia. And I was wondering why they're not so much interested in becoming more global. So also by speaking English. And of course, one reason could be that they're not proficient in English, but also I was wondering if there is also a nationalistic drive involved in their mission. Thank you.
Wow, that's a great question. Your research is absolutely intriguing, and I'd love to. That's a pity that I'm not there in person. We should talk another time. Proficiency, language proficiency might be part of it, but I think it's also a kind of a market thing, you know. So indeed many of their performances are in their talks, and their lectures, and their kuliah, and are in Malay. Also because the television programs in which they appear and the radio programs in which they appear are in Malay, and they're simply catered to that majority Malay Muslim population. So that's a bit of a maybe unsatisfying answer, but it is, you know, how the media are organized. And maybe there's not enough of an audience that really demands English language talks. At the same time, there's a drive towards also more, certainly because you mentioned nationalism, but one of the interesting trends I think in Malaysia is that Malaysia is trying to become a more globally recognized source of authority also in the Muslim world at large. And I briefly mentioned that television show TV Al Hijrah, which has kind of an ambition to be a kind of Southeast Asian Al Jazeera, but then much more geared toward Islamic content. And they have a lot of English language programs in which also these women sometimes appear. So I think there's a bit of a trend there, but in general, indeed, I think you're right. The main language is Malay.
My question now? Go on, Karen, please.
Okay. The green is working, but okay. Okay, thank you very much for your interesting lecture. I also really enjoyed what you said about behind every female PhD is a great husband. So I think it kind of also shows that there might be some changes in gender arrangement in daily life. And I wanted to ask in how far these female authorities, which I also know from the Egyptian context, in how far they also have space to kind of launch a different gender discourse. So in how far do their authority and the way they live and the example they provide also make space for different notions of gender, different discourses of gender, maybe less based on complementarity of gender. So in how far is there a kind of reformulation also of the religious gender discourse? So the message, I would like to hear more about the message and the gender discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, there's absolutely a reformulation and reconfiguration going on in public discourse on gender relations, and it's of course, I thought it's an unsatisfactory answer, but it's always complicated. In this Islamic revivalist discourse, there is a tension between on the one hand, this demand for women authority, this demand for talking about about religious issues from a woman's point of view, from women's point of view of women's experiences and conundrums, and at the same time, it's a conservative discourse. It is also, in many ways, become contested. Women's bodies have voices have become contested in ways they weren't, several decades ago, or less so. So there's always that tension. But if you look at actually what is being said and the actual norms that are being communicated, yes, there's, I think, definitely a transformation going on, and of course there's maybe differences. There's more conservative women, there's more progressive women, but I'm also interested in exactly those women who kind of break through that dichotomy, or that show a more a complex picture than that struggle between, on the one hand, Islamic feminist interpretations on the one hand, and decidedly conservative interpretations. And that example of the preacher I mentioned, the quote you mentioned, behind every woman PhD there's a supporting male husband, there's a supporting husband. Fatima Shaha is a very interesting example, I think, because in many ways she is a archetypical ustaza figure, also in her whole comportment, and the modesty she preaches, and the ideals of motherhood and domestic values she preaches, very clearly there. On the other hand, she has remarkably complex and nuanced views on gender relations in Islam that go well beyond common conservative understanding. For instance, when it comes to polygamy, she has, or polygyny, I should say, has an opinion that is actually very close to those of Islamic feminists, such as in Sisters in Islam, where she says that polygyny is allowed in Islam. You see it in its context, and in a society where there's no war, and where there's no real reasons to practice polygamy, then it actually becomes unethical to practice polygamy. And she's very vocal about that, and very convincing. So that kind of shifts are super interesting, and they're definitely there.
Yeah, you had a question.
Yes, good morning, David. Christian Lange here. Greetings to the Netherlands, groeten naar Nederland. Thank you for your very nice talk. I was curious about this correlation that you mentioned between the increase in mobility of women and the increase in the use of the hijab. And you were also mentioning that there is a suggestion that this might actually be a causal relationship, because there's more mobility, there are more opportunities for losing one's sense of shame. I forget the Indonesian word that you used, but I think it corresponds to Arabic haya, I suppose. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a pretty plausible suggestion about this causal relationship, but you also seem to be quite skeptical about this, and I just wanted to ask if you could tell us a little more about your skepticism. Why does the theory perhaps not work? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christian. Yeah, so I think my skepticism is from the viewpoint of I'm going to be a bit crude here, but the literature on the Islamic revival in its first decades has been very much kind of historical, sociological in orientation, always looking or advancing explanations for changes, people adopting new religious practices, or becoming, da'wah, becoming to preach, looking for explanations outside religious practice and experience. So it always has to do with, political change, with migration, with urbanization, with economic changes, basically forgetting about actual inner religiosities and what might motivate either women or men to take up particular or cultivate particular Islamic virtues and practices. So my skepticism stems from there, that, you know, don't forget to actually talk to people and ask what motivates them. I think that was something that was left out from the discussion for a long time, looking for these more macro level sociological explanations.
Background there. I think he has a mic already. He has a mic already.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much. My name is Kante Hamed, student from Faculty of Islamic Studies at Universitas Islam International Indonesia. My question is, in France and European countries like France especially, in media like France 24, for example, you can see a reportage, a woman leading Juma prayer and like a khatiba. She's making khutbah and she's making fatwa also to say that women also can be imam in the masjid to lead a Juma prayer. So my question is this propaganda or Islamophobia, or this is just a legitimate debate to give the same authorities to women preachers? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I'm not a theologian, and I don't think I'm you know, I have any claim on saying whether that should be allowed or not. Of course, it is. It's a very and in the Islamic feminist movement, this has been, you know, major point that has been advanced. You know, can a woman also then really equality in Islam means that a woman should also be allowed to lead prayer, also to a mixed gender audience. Of course, that's the question, right? It's never, the question is not whether a woman can lead prayer for an audience of women. It's, can she lead prayer as an imam for a audience, for a mixed gender jama'ah. It seems to be that this is one of the most contentious issues. Many people will not accept that this is allowed, or at least not be prepared to follow such prayers. But you also mention fatwas, and kind of depending on how fatwas are, how you define the concept of fatwa, there if you really start looking, in a way it becomes much more interesting, because women are issuing fatwas all the time, either in intimate gatherings or in more public gatherings. Indonesia, I think, is a great example. And I should not be the one talking about this, nor Isma, who is in the audience, has written a wonderful dissertation about women scholars, women ulama in Indonesia issuing fatwas on an everyday basis. And that is, you know, well, you can talk about legitimacy. It's just reality. It's common practice, but it is hardly studied.
We have a few minutes more.
Hello, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Isma. I'm from Leiden University. Thank you, David, for mentioning my name. Okay, so I had a small conversation with my colleague from Muslim living under women living under Muslim law research and publication about some factors that disenable women to mobile And in your presentation, you mentioned some factors that enable women to mobile. As I remember, one of them is cheap transportation and also Islamic revival. So I was curious about some these enabling factors that you found in your research, especially during Khairun Nisa period. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great correction to my talk, Isma, because of course I realize I focused more on enabling factors compared to constraining factors, and you asked me to look at Khairun Nisa's period when she was most active, I guess, you know, so 50s, 60s, 70s. But let me start with allow me to start more in the present, because of course Islamic revivalism, or the particular norms and virtues that we commonly associate with Islamic revivalism, also comes with all kinds of constraints, new constraints with regard to the permissibility of women's bodies and voices in the public sphere. Or norms such as the need to travel with your husband or your brother is also something that is in some context reinvented rather than invented as something that really guides and constrains women's mobilities. And when it comes to Khairun Nisa's period, I think I talked indeed about things like transport and technology and globalization in a kind of general sense, which is very relevant if you talk about places like Penang. But constraints, especially in the domestic context, I think, were obviously very real. And also in her case, had I had more time to discuss, I would talk a little bit about her. Because her career did not last very long. It was a very conspicuous career. It was not a very long career. And constraints, you know, placed on her by her, not so much by her family, but by her husband were very much, although she was vague about this, and I should be a little bit more open perhaps about my sources here. Her life history has been Mahani Musa at the University of Science Malaysia in Penang has in a bigger project on biographies has created this, has carried out multiple interviews, and in those interviews she's not entirely clear about it, but constraints placed on her by her husband, particularly mobility and the ability to travel and move freely, was definitely a constraint.
For a speaker. Oh.
Hi, David. This is Martin van Branessen.
Hi, Martin.
Hi. Talking about constraining factors, I missed one important constraining or enabling factor in your talk, and that is the state. In Malaysia, Islam is in control of the sultans, except in the areas of the parts of Malaysia where the sultans do not rule, such as Penang, Malacca, and Singapore. And I think it's not a coincidence that you find reformist movements precisely in these three strait settlements. To what extent do you think the career of Khairun Nisa was enabled in the 50s and 60s by the fact that she lived outside the control of the state? And in a period when, in the 80s, we see that the federal state becomes more Islamicized, you see a sort of polarization. On the one hand, you have the Zaina Anwar types who are close to the ruling party and who retain a well-established elite secularism. And on the other hand, you see people coming up from down who are strongly Malay revivalists, who also insist on traditional Islamic norms and who support this Islamic revivalism as a more conservative wing that is certainly not liberating towards women. In Indonesia, you might also say, hasn't the state at various stages not been constraining, I'm thinking of the previous president, or enabling, as the present government seems to be doing, of women's free expression?
Yeah, great point, Martin. You're absolutely right, of course. Although, when it comes to, well, yes, you're right. When it comes to the reformist schools, there were also elite schools in places like Kelantan that were supported by the Sultan in the early 20th century, that also allowed women students. They were not called madrasas. They were not Islamic schools as such, but there were also Islamic schools. I think so. There's this what is an Islamic school? So I think also there, if you look carefully, you will find examples that do not completely match that dichotomy, and that also comes, I think, with contemporary examples. So I think in broad lines, I agree with you. But then when you say with Islamic revivalism is definitely not, supporting women's, I forgot exactly your formulation, but I think it's much more complicated. I think Islamic revivalism has simultaneously enabled and constrained women authorities to emerge. And my final example about, or in the discussion just now when I was talking about Fatima Shah is a very clear example of that. So I think it's slightly more complicated than that. But thanks for bringing in the factor of the state in the discussion, because it is indeed a major factor in both countries.
Yeah, a big clap for David, because it was a fantastic talk. And yeah, let's enjoy lunch.
Okay, thank you, Professor Polite and Professor Close. Now we will have an hour break, and we'll have lunch in the same place. Please just go there. And then after the lunch, we will do workshop in 2 places. The first class will be on the upstairs of this building, the 2nd floor of the building, and the second class is at the Pascasarjana building, the graduate school building. It's only in the map you'll see that's in 1, 2, 3, the third building from this building. So on your right when you go there. So there will be some people to help to guide you over there. So over there will be around 50 chairs available over there, 50 seats. So you can and there will be more seats here. There will be more seats here. Please help yourself to do so. Okay, that's all. And another thing, I also forgot to tell you that our university has got the award from the Indonesian government for the most inclusive university. So that you see that the ladies over there, she is always ready to translate everything we have during the keynote speakers into for people with disability. Okay, and thank you so much, Mbak. Okay. Okay, that's all. Thank you so much. Please enjoy your lunch. Okay.